Hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on really what's up with 5G and business services. So we've heard a whole lot over the past day about 5G, and you'll have heard from both Moa Katiba at AT&T, from Neville Ray, from Verizon and others about the importance of B2B, and of course from Todd's recent talk just a few minutes ago as well. B2B is really the focus, but something I've observed is that 5G is often treated as a monolith, like as if it's all here right now and we're 100% ready to fire on all rockets and it's all go. And in fact, 5G itself is evolving. Business needs themselves are evolving. So we've assembled a panel here, and I'd like to hand off to my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. I'll go first. Evan Kirshheimer, Research VP at Omdia, part of Informa Tech, the organizers of this event, and I cover all of service provider and communications research. So I'll hand off to William.
Thanks, Evan. William Stovall with AT&T, and I'm our product vice president on our enterprise mobility space. So think of Internet of Things, 5G, and FirstNet in my portfolio.
Great.
Hey, Evan. Thank you. I'm Todd Krock-Kramer with Cradlepoint. Great to be with you again. And I can see our virtual panelists here.
Hello, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, this is Masum Mir. I'm the VP GM with Cisco, responsible for our mobile, cable, and IoT business.
Hi, then I'm Jay Thattil. I'm heading the strategic marketing for service providers with Juniper Networks.
Great, well, welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us virtually. So I'm going to start with the first question. So the first question is, really, where are we right now with 5G for business? And you guys have a lot of experience talking to enterprises out there, understanding their needs. Given where you sit in your organizations, you understand the capabilities that you can bring to meet those needs. There's been a lot of hype in the market. Some of that hype we heard about yesterday. Fair enough. So can you talk to us now about how the 5G of today, as opposed to the 5G of tomorrow or the long-term future, how the 5G of today is meeting those business needs and what some of those business needs are? So I'll hand off to you first, William.
All right, thanks, Evan. First I would say it's an exciting time to be a part of this industry, especially in the role I sit as a product development owner. When you think about the capabilities and potential 5G has, it gets you really excited to be a part of this space. When you think about it, though, we're just kind of scratching the surface right now. The innovation curve is going to start accelerating over the next couple years, and I think enterprises are making this choice on, do I get into 5G now, or do I wait until it matures further? And they're coming to us for guidance on 3 topics. One is, how's 5G being used today? Second is, what are the use cases that could impact my business? And third is, how do I build those use cases into my growth strategy? And I think if you get underneath that a little bit, there's some underlying drivers for that. One would be the need for real-time data insights to make decisions quicker. Automation to drive business process change. How do I adopt IoT endpoints into my strategy? And then I think overarching that is a heightened interest in network performance. And so the good news is a lot of that can be accomplished with 5G today via some of the solutions. Todd just talked about one of them with private cellular networks and edge computing. And when you think about those two in particular, they're very horizontal in nature. They can span a number of different verticals. And so what we're focused on with our customers is helping educate them on how that can be applied to their business and advising them on that integration process.
Great. Masum, I think you had commentary when we talked a little bit earlier about some of the needs of enterprise. Some of them seem to overlap with what William was saying. I don't know if you have anything to add at this stage.
Sure, William framed it really, really well. This is, when you talk to Fortune 500 companies, almost all the enterprise, 5G is a conversation. It is a big topic. And everyone is trying to understand how this 5G is going to play in the enterprise environment. But we need to actually go one layer deeper on what is the enterprise need. Look, I think it has become very, very prevalent that digital transformation of the enterprises and industries is accelerating. Going forward, we'll see more and more investment on fully digital enterprises. So we also have to pay attention that 5G cannot be a thing. It's not just a technology. How 5G fits within their digital transformation and acceleration of the digital transformation. That's number one. Second, all our IT friends within industries as well as enterprises, they're all trying to design out complexity. We know these advanced technologies oftentimes comes with a lot of complexities, but we have to be extremely mindful that we have to design out complexity and bring extreme automation or it is ready for business. The third aspect, which oftentimes we think as an afterthought, it cannot be afterthought anymore as we think about these enterprises and that running business on these infrastructures, and 5G is going to play a critical role. IT control and security and safeguard. It has to be built in day one. And most importantly, the ease of consumption. So any new technology that we bring into enterprise environment, it needs to be part of their digital transformation journey. We need to provide them digital interfaces, but most importantly, we need to provide consumption flexibility. The old model is changing. Look, majority of our enterprises are consuming more and more cloud, and they want to see cloud economics going forward. So these are some of the areas I think collectively we have to work together. As William is there, with AT&T, we have started some of this journey for very targeted industries where we can actually prove that you don't have to wait for 5G. 5G broad coverage is going to take time, but we can start now in certain use cases with LTE advanced and gradually take you to 5G. So it is super important for us to stay aligned on helping enterprises to get there. But security and digital transformation has to be on the centerpiece of it.
Yeah, you know, Ivan, there's just speaking really pragmatically, you're absolutely right. Every CIO is already committed to 5G. They know they have to change their business in ways they never imagined. 5G is going to be part of the solution. They may not even know how. They know it's going to be part of it. So looking 3 years out, 5G is definitely it. But now they're going to make a decision. I'm going through a major WAN upgrade. I'm going to live with that for 5 years. How do I bake in a pathway to 5G so that everything will unfold? And you're right, it's not a Big Bang theory. You know, 5G starts today very much looking like a better version of LTE and becomes everything we want it to become with SA and ultra-wideband, 5G plus, you know, in the future, widespread. But businesses want all of that, but they don't want to make investments that'll move them off track. And that's the dilemma they're facing, is how do I make investments now that move me on a pathway to take advantage of everything 5G will deliver on every carrier it'll deliver it on without having to throw away my investment. That's a real challenge.
I mean, something we talked about, Todd, when we were having our discussion before this this panel was the connection between, you know, 5G and mobile corporate networks and the corporate network overall. And one of the surveys and pieces of research we did was to identify whether business decision makers made a link between 5G and the wide area network. There's a whole lot of investment going on in SD-WAN, and I think that's very much, there was definitely a connection made in the research we've done between people investing in solutions that will eventually be based on a 5G platform and seeing it as part of their overall wide area network, including support for branches and other areas. I mean, you've obviously seen that at Cradlepoint as well.
Well, that's true. I'm fond of saying there'll never be another WAN built or refreshed that's not SD-WAN. I mean, who would do that? Yeah. Everybody wants their WAN to be more cloud-like, more agile, more dynamic, and require less humans to manage it than ever before. And in the last 20, 30 years, that hasn't been the case. The other thing that's very true, and you touched on this, we got to stop thinking about WANs as brick and mortar, as we have for the last 20, 30 years. Because the new WAN is going to have vehicles and mobile workforces. It's going to cover ports, as we talked about earlier. It's going to have IoT devices everywhere, inside buildings, outside buildings, in the field. That's going to be the new WAN. And when you start to think of it that way, you can start to see how 5G and mobile technology intersects that, because it'll be a big part of that essential infrastructure in the next WAN.
Now, Jay, I had a little kind of comment from you earlier about kind of push versus pull, and how much enterprises are educated about 5G, but also the other access technologies out there like Wi-Fi 6, LoRa, and others. So then, as a major vendor in the space, I mean, what is your experience on that point?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I see, like, there are three key actors in the private 5G space, right? One is the service providers. We know there's a huge push from their end, and there are two key drivers for that. One is these technology enablers, the shared and local spectrum options that is available, the small cells, the cloud edge computing, enhanced security. All these are helping them to provide something more than basic connectivity that they used to do. Then there's a commercial aspect, which is, the revenues are flatlining with consumers with 5G. Right? So they do need the enterprise revenues for their expensive 5G investment to be profitable. And if you look from the enterprise side, is there a hype? Is there a, they are slowly, we surveyed almost like 40 enterprises, and the feedback that we're getting is it's early stages. They do understand. What they want is generally the systems need to work efficiently. Of course, they would like it to be automated much faster, but the technology makes them do it. It's great, fantastic. But then also there is this debate about Wi-Fi, which they have already invested heavily in, and private 5G coming into the picture. How are they gonna match up? Do I need to invest a lot more? And so there is a bit of education that is needed to make them understand that, outdoor it's private 5G, indoor it's Wi-Fi, how they can work together. That aspect need to be clearly articulated, and the objective is different for different use cases, as I think like Todd was mentioning before as well. Then we have the third party, which is the government. There is a regulatory and policymaker interest in private 5G, especially as part of these national industry 4.0 plans, right? Many countries are linking this to their rapid economic recovery from the pandemic as well. This is helping to accelerate. They are like shifting, they're opening up more spectrums and making it available for the enterprises and the SPs. But then they're also providing certain funds pumping into the private cellular market with like the US CARES Act for education access and UK's vertically focused test buds and trials program. So all these three actors, and of course, coming from a vendor side, we also have an interest in terms of building these technologies and delivering the services that enterprises are looking for. So if you look holistically, I think there is more of a push than pull, but at the same time, enterprises are opening up and warming up to the idea, especially when you talk about automation and cloud analytics. They feel that these technological advancements are very much needed. And you can throw the ecosystem in the mix as well, right? How the collaborations are happening with the service providers, integrators, vendors, hyperscalers, all are trying to bring it all together to make sure that innovation happens and services are delivered profitably to the end users.
So, Jay, I mean, you've used two terms there that I want to build on. The first term you used was ecosystem, and the other one was use cases. So maybe we can build a bridge to the next section of the panel. But I just wanted commentary about ecosystem first before we move to use cases. So, do you as a panel feel the ecosystem to deliver for enterprises? I've heard a lot about making it consumable, making it predictable, making it pre-integrated. I mean, do we feel the ecosystem has stepped up, and who's stepping up where? So let's sort of comment a little bit on that, and then I'd love to move to use cases. Massim, did you have a comment on the ecosystem?
This is a very good point, that the ecosystem, and it can become very fragmented very quickly, because we are not only talking about connecting people, we are talking about machine and be part of this digital society and digital businesses. We strongly feel that the driver's seat here is big players in this space needs to drive the ecosystem. The partnership between, for example, the partnership that we are doing with our tier 1 operators and some of the cloud providers. I think we're in a very good spot in this technology evolution, where the big players who understand enterprise, the big players who understand this telco infrastructure, as well as the folks who are very good at application ecosystem. These three players in the market, I think we are starting to collaborate really well. What we believe needs a little bit more work on the machine ecosystem. When you think about handset, there is an ecosystem built, but when you're now thinking about machines and the sensors, obviously there is a huge amount of support from the chip makers like the Intel and the Qualcomm of the world, but still from an application-specific IoTs, there's some fragmentation. But I feel like we are in a very good spot because of the alliance that we have already built with folks like between Cisco and AT&T. We have built similar relationship with other carriers in US with T-Mo. Internationally, we're building these type of ecosystems in Australia, in China, in Japan. So I think the momentum is there.
Great.
Yeah, the ecosystem, you raise a good point. I mean, it's very clear, and you mentioned this, William, that CIOs are coming to the carriers to see you as subject matter experts, and they're really leaning on you to deliver that ecosystem. But think about that ecosystem pragmatically. If you're deploying mid-band or millimeter wave, you've got probably an outside building installation. So there's an ecosystem challenge right away. If you're putting edge computing in the middle of it, you've got an ecosystem challenge. If you want to have network slicing and take advantage of that, as I expect that'll roll out here in the next couple of years, which will deliver MPLS-like capabilities over 5G, something very attractive to enterprises. There's a lot of ecosystem players there in the radio networks and the edge compute side to make that all work. And they're going to be leaning on players like AT&T to say, make this all work for me. But underneath the surface, there's going to be a lot of ecosystem players that fill those parts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, go ahead.
And I was going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's one thing to build the network to deliver these capabilities. But then when you start thinking about the ecosystem from a hardware standpoint, we have to build the hardware to be able to actually deliver these capabilities to the end user. And then there's a third wrapper, which is how do you present all of that to the customer?
Make it all work.
And you want it to be simple, but you also want them to have options. And so, we'll touch on slicing a little bit later, but when you think about how do you orchestrate all of this and put it in front of the customer, how do I buy this? Yeah. Is it monthly? Is it session-based? Is it a la carte? Is it a time-based plan that I have? And you want all those options, really, but you want to make it simple. And so this is the challenge as you kind of frame all of this together.
And you also want to make it predictable, right? And so there's no surprises for the enterprise, and you want to make it enterprise grade. And I would contend there's still a lot of work to do there. But I think the major vendors and the service providers are in a natural position of trust, right? Because it's big companies dealing with big companies. There's so many small players in the ecosystem. Who are you going to trust to pull it together, right? That's sort of another sense that we get when we speak and do research with enterprises is they're just looking for someone to trust to guide them through. But I want to move now to use cases because we've heard a lot about, I was running a private networks track yesterday, and there were some fascinating use cases in interesting industries. We've tracked the market at Omdia, and manufacturing and transport and logistics are key for at least private network side of 5G story, right? But I want to hear about those use cases, and I want to hear about other interesting industry use cases that you guys have encountered. Jay, I don't know if you want to go first and take this and sort of maybe throw some interesting cases out there.
Sure. Thanks. And I know, like in the previous sessions, and I've been listening, they've touched several use cases, but if you had asked me this question a couple of years back, I would have come up with a different list of use cases. But as you know, the pandemic, everything has gone remotely, right? Remote learning, hybrid working, virtual events. The fact that I and Masoom are beamed into this hybrid event where Todd and William are sitting and listening to us, and it's amazing. So the opportunities are quite huge. And video is one of the key things. And people working from home, the enterprises and service providers are forced to look at home as kind of a mini enterprise where you need to give that level of SLAs so people can access and work from home effectively and efficiently. Right? So video is going to be a huge. And the other one I would just highlight is healthcare. And I know previously few have touched upon that as well. I'm not talking about this remote surgery. Those are far out, it's going to happen. But connected ambulances. There's a research that was done in the UK where I'm in, talking about how it can ease the pressure on A&E if you know where to divert the ambulance and what kind of care the patient requires. Then you don't need to come to the A&E to diagnose and say go. This is saving lives plus easing up the staff. So these are use cases that we're already seeing, and I'm sure my fellow panelists have much more to say about the use cases.
Yeah, I would. I think all of us should be pretty excited because over the last couple of days, we've heard a number of different use cases. And I think what it tells us is that the need and the ability to deliver on those needs are there today. I'll touch on a couple, maybe in different verticals here. We've talked a lot about healthcare and manufacturing. In automotive, as an example, we're working with an automotive OEM using private 5G and edge computing to automate the firmware update process on vehicles as they're going through the assembly line. Now, previous to this, the way they did this, they had a couple folks that were riding around the factory floor on scooters going station to station and manually plugging in to do the update. And then once you have that infrastructure, though, then you can scale into things like worker safety and knowing if your employees have the right protective equipment on to operate machinery. We've hit on agriculture a little bit. I'll take a different angle and talk about one that we're really excited about. It's working with a greenhouse company. And when you think of private cellular and edge computing, you probably often think of it's inside the four walls. This company is not inside the four walls. In fact, they have greenhouses covering over 100 acres. And so we worked with them on a private 5G outdoor RAN instance with edge computing over the top, which is changing how they operate everything in their greenhouse. Watering, temperature control, the cranes that are picking up the plants and transplanting them to different parts of the greenhouse, the drivers that are coming in and out. But here's what's kind of interesting in this deployment. I think enterprises there's a couple choice points they're having to make when they're going down this path. Do I invest in Wi-Fi? Do I go unlicensed spectrum? Do I use licensed spectrum? And one of the unique needs this customer specifically had was, I need a majority of my devices to also have native voice on them. And what that did is you start ruling out the spectrum option. So we ended up designing a licensed spectrum option because you could do all the things with private 5G and edge computing, but on those same devices, you could use the network for voice services so they can replace LMR, push to talk.
It's really an interesting point. I mean, we're in such a data-centric world, people forget about the importance of voice,
That's
the
right.
criticality of voice, and the service levels associated with real-time communications in these private networks.
And that's where they need the guidance to be thinking of those checkpoints. The last one I'll hit on is sports. And there's a couple angles we're approaching this. One is external and the fan experience. So you've likely seen that we partnered with the NBA to conduct the first ever full 5G broadcast of an NBA game using millimeter wave and using consumer handsets. It was all done with Samsung handsets. And what it did is it showed that we could present the game in a different format for end users that may resonate more with them because of the camera angles you can get that you couldn't get over traditional broadcast. The second is think more internally. So we're working with an NFL team to improve player performance. And so we've taken private 5G and edge computing, and we've created an instance of that out on their practice field. Why would you do that? Well, before, they had no way to quickly access video replays to see what was happening on the field to better coach their players. Now, having the bandwidth, the low latency, they're getting those videos real time. And then you think about it, it becomes kind of cool because that's what's showing up on Sunday, right? In the real game is what they're doing on the practice facility using this technology.
Yeah, it's so fun talking about use cases because they're here, they're now, they're practical, they're solving real problems. I'll give you two quickly. One builds on what you said, William. Today we have a lot of sports going on within schools that because of COVID, there's a lot of people that can't access it, right? So through 5G now, you can have a broadcast of high school sports or local sports to all these people at home that are viewing it that can now participate. 5G delivers that today. Another example is construction site down in Australia with the Telstra mid-band network. 400 megabits per second delivered to a construction site. The beauty of that is there's all these built-up applications they had ready to go, but they could not deliver the bandwidth they needed at the construction site. That's transformational. So they're doing things like real-time monitoring of the re-rod and contract pours to know if that's a good pour. They're able to use VR and AR through Microsoft to envision the building built and see problems before they actually lay the concrete or the studs or other things. So it's changing the way they build from a liability, from a investment from a security standpoint, because there's security on everybody's helmet, and they walk by and it's constantly scanned. It says, oh, Bob there on the 4th floor hasn't finished all his security requirements to do what he's doing. So it completely changes the landscape. Why? Because 400 megabits delivered to a construction site.
I mean, that's a great case study in the sense that both you've got a need that's there for maybe a year or two, right? And then it's like a pop-up instance where you need this kind of intense connectivity. And the other thing is it builds on Jay's comment about the video as an application and analytics and making decisions really close to site and very quickly about critical infrastructure there in the build. So fascinating. Massim, did you have anything to add in terms of use case?
Look, it is that, William actually talked about it a lot on the connected vehicle and how it expands from there. That is great. It's here and now. Something we oftentimes forget, and these are the things that we don't see every day. We drink water, but is it the safe water? We consume electricity. Are we protected? So there is also an immediate opportunity and 5G use cases to connect the unconnected. And there are two unconnected areas that we can tap into. One is small businesses. During COVID-19 and during this entire period, small businesses struggled the most. And getting coverage to all the small businesses to compete with the big businesses, 5G can play a very vital role here and now. The second part is all these infrastructures that we take it for granted, providing safe electricity, cleaner water, preserving water. We have an opportunity to go and help those industries to get digitized sooner rather than later. And that's, I also think, is an opportunity right now. We don't have to wait.
100%.
The great thing about this discussion so far is we've built it so much, we're a little bit behind, so I'm going to move us on, but that's I think in a good way, right? I'm going to move us on because we've been talking about the 5G of today, right? But I said at the beginning, the 5G of today is not the 5G of tomorrow. Networked, essentially it's just faster internet at this stage. I'm going to get shot for that comment. But soon, we are, obviously there are enhanced security features, of course, and reliability and latency improvements. But, we are probably a year or two away from when we're in a standalone situation where the feature and functionality of 5G available over public networks really can compete with fixed virtual private networks. So, Todd, I really wanted to ask you a little bit, and Will especially, about, what do you see a year or two from now in a standalone environment with network slicing, better features and functionality, better capabilities? What kind of do you see as possibilities opening up in terms of for B2B applications?
Well, you're absolutely correct. The 5G of today is not the 5G of tomorrow. It's largely built on, existing LTE spectrum. Because spectrum plays a huge role. That's why the C-band auction was so important, giving us that spectrum needed to deliver the next generation of 5G. But underneath it all, there's things happening that do deliver more than a better internet for critical enterprise applications. For example, if you look at today's even 5G running in low band on 850 megahertz LTE spectrum, there's more carrier aggregation channels now that are available because you're taking advantage of 256 QAM, you're taking advantage of all the channel or carrier aggregation, you're taking advantage of the 4x4 MIMO, all those things that are foundational in 5G actually create a better experience. So what does that mean? That means I can get more uplink bandwidth than I ever got before. I have lower latency than I had before, even in the NSA environment. So I will argue it's going to roll out with LTE nationwide coverage first. Then we're going to see mid-band start to play as more spectrum comes into the mix. And as devices can terminate that inside and outside the building. And then we'll see ultra-wideband move from kind of that urban core and start to be more prolific across the footprint of the nations as that spectrum comes available. And as we shift from NSA to SA, you're going to see the core start to move and become more distributed, giving us that ultra-low latency, giving us that high, millions, billions of endpoints that we can connect. All those things we imagine 5G to be starts to happen over the next 3 years as the spectrum and some of the underlying technology becomes a reality.
Yeah, that's a great foundation setting. I'll build on that. As we look to pivot our network to a standalone core, that's to me when you start the acceleration curve on what's possible.
100%.
And it's because of the architecture of the network, the intelligent, and really the virtual network functions that it's going to enable. How we're thinking about applying that move into real-world products for customers. We touched on slicing, so let me build on that a little bit. When you think about network slicing, think about the ability to carve out the network into specific slices that all have specific class of service attributes to meet a user case. I'll use manufacturing as kind of the use case here. I have my machines on the factory floor. I have video cameras, maybe running computer vision. I have my employees walking around the factory floor with tablets in their hands. With network slicing, what a customer would be able to do is take a slice that has high bandwidth, low jitter, and point it to the cameras running computer vision. Mm-hmm. Take a separate slice that offers the lowest latency and point it to the machines so that you can quickly turn off a machine, turn it on, redirect the manufacturing, and then for your users that are walking around the plant floor, they may not need a specific slice. They just use the general network. So that becomes something that becomes very real when you go to standalone.
Kind of what you're describing is a hybrid environment, right? Where some channels are prioritized and some aren't. Some might be on a public network, some might be private. And that crossover between public network and private network, we haven't really fully explored. But again, I feel carriers are in a unique position there, right? Because they can create a consistent service experience for the enterprise, across both those private instance and a slice or virtual private slice of a public network.
I think the other thing to hit on is we talk 5G and it's usually it's download, download, download. That's what we talk about. How fast is the download? How low is latency?
The uplink.
There's an uplink need too. So one of the other things we're looking at is uplink priority service. Now, why does that matter? Let's use healthcare as an example. And we know telehealth is becoming more popular. Imagine an environment where an end user is doing their remote virtual visit and they don't have the bandwidth they need to get that quality. The telehealth provider could then make an API call to provide uplink priority or give that end user a boost of service and class of uplink speed that has that low jitter, that high video throughput, ultimately leading to the patient having a better and more thorough examination.
A better outcome.
That's not a pipe dream. Ericsson has that technology right now today, so that's a reality. That's right around the corner.
Yep.
So,
Massa and Jay, did you have anything to add here in terms of slicing, uplink?
Yeah, again, instance, we talk about slicing. People always talk about, coming from the vendor side, depending on what you have. Is it transport slicing, core slicing, or RAM slicing? One of the key aspects, if you are looking from this cliche end-to-end slicing, is also the service management and orchestration. Right? I mean, you have a slice, but if you cannot manage and orchestrate efficiently, then the services that you're deploying on that, it'll be very patchy. And that's why we talk about this end-to-end service management and orchestration that also covers through the slicing. But I think, like William explained, slicing much better than what I can at the moment, of course.
well, it feels a lot like MPLS is coming to 5G, which is an enterprise dream because MPLS has been the most successful wireline service in history for all those reasons you mentioned, the determinism, the ability to control the different classes of service. Add that to 5G, that sounds like peanut butter and chocolate to me. That's goodness.
Yeah, well, you talked about SD-WAN, and there was the comments around how do you connect the mobile endpoints into that environment. And a third kind of a component is private routing. And again, this is enabled by the standalone core, where imagine where an enterprise could take both their nomadic wireless devices or IoT endpoints that are stationary and connect them directly to the WAN for security, bypassing all public traffic. I mean, that is a reality as well.
So as we move to the future, and a lot of the stuff that you've described is a reality, but I would say it's probably not quite mainstream yet. But of course, it will become mainstream over the next couple of years. And as we see 5G as I'm not sure, I'll say an MPLS substitute or enhanced version of mobile MPLS. Let's call it mobile MPLS.
Does
that work? So mobile MPLS.
I got to trademark that somehow.
Yeah, it's good. I stumbled on that one. But I mean, one of the things we found, if we just think back about enterprise networking, it's the management, it's the control. Some enterprises will want to manage it themselves. Some will want to turn to a managed service provider. So can we talk about what the managed future looks like in this environment?
Yeah, our virtual folks have really covered that. I'll hand the mic to them very quickly, but let me set the stage. You nailed it. We're going to have more devices connected. We're going to have more capabilities in the network, as William talked about, but there'll be less humans that have less skills than ever before to deal with it all. That's the reality. And that only means that networks have to become smarter, more orchestrated, more self-organizing, just like the cloud compute environment has, right? So that kind of sets the stage. I know our virtual friends here have some comments.
Well, let me take a crack at it. The future state we talked about here and now, where we want to go. To get to the full potential, we have to think about a business end-to-end. If we just think about enterprise of the future, it's hybrid forever. So we cannot just think about office location. Whatever my employees, my office is there. And 5G has to participate on that. We think about industries, like from what we produce to what we store to finally, move through states and countries and eventually deliver it to the end user. We have to think about the entire value chain. What's most important for 5G to be really, really successful for businesses and consumable for businesses, it cannot stay as an island. It needs to come mainstream. Our end user and the application will move from a Wi-Fi network coming to private 5G, then they will go into a public 5G. But the experience and the trust and the security needs to become it's very, very seamless, and we need to design complexity out. This is what we all have to drive towards. Otherwise, a great technology is not going to achieve its full potential.
Here.
Yeah, great one. And I would add to that, I would say, go back to the ecosystems, right? You talk about, you really need to have that partnership and relationship with whether it's the SIs, service providers, enterprises, hyperscalers. We all need to come together to make sure the needs of the enterprises are met, right? Just focusing on that aspect. And Masum, you covered what they need from the control perspective. I would even say some of these are commercialization. Looking for an MNO like themselves, like you take a retail mall, you want to have control on and deliver these services to individual shops. So understanding the need and trying to address that through this collaboration is the way to go forward. And that's where, I say innovation breeds innovation, I would say ecosystem breeds innovation. And there could be ecosystems, so to speak. You cannot have everything pre-integrated, so there needs to be that flexibility. Yeah. But I think this is the way you can flourish in this industry, especially addressing the enterprise market.
And I think we see those ecosystems evolving in the sense that there are industry specialists out there who help translate some of the technical capabilities into specific business value. Sometimes that's done by the vendors or the major service providers themselves. So we're seeing this evolve. And I know we have a few minutes left. So what I want to do is to sort of say that we've heard about some interesting use cases, right? And I think that we can all agree that there's a lot of innovation going on in this space. So I wanted to ask everyone on the panel to think about telco innovation. Is there anything that you would like to bring to the audience, enterprises out there, partner ecosystems, examples of innovation? Where have telcos really excelled? And you're definitely allowed to talk about AT&T, but you may mention other service providers too, just in the interest of balance. But why don't we start with you, William, and talk a little bit about where you see innovation within your organization?
Well, I think, one, the ecosystem is a big piece of this. We work with everybody here virtually and here with me with Todd to create solutions that drive the enterprise outcomes they're looking for. And even though some things on the 5G are still on the horizon, it can't stop the level of innovation and the speed that all of us in this room are doing to help continue to enable an enterprise to deliver those outcomes they're looking for. It really takes all of us. And I think maybe going back to the whole ecosystem discussion for a second, to me, that's why we're all here in this room, because we have to collaborate together. We have to partner up if we're going to deliver on the promise of 5G.
But I mean, even in concrete terms, some innovation can be something very simple, which is actually deceptively simple. It's like the tariff that enables the right kind of consumption in this environment. And I know that you have launched some innovative tariffs, and I don't know if you and Todd had some comment on sort of mobile tariffing.
No, innovation doesn't have to be big bang, as you suggest. Just getting the right data plans that are no overage data plans, that are flat rate data plans, that really represent what enterprises need and want from this new innovative technology. Seems like a small thing, but frankly, getting that right will be part of breaking the floodgates open, because economics matter. And if the economics are cheaper to go with wired broadband, they will do so, because the unknown is something that enterprises work very hard to get out of their model. So, I mean, AWB plan which I happen to use in my at-home, is a great example. I have a 50 megabit per second AWB plan that delivers 50 megabits per second. I don't have to worry about overages. I pay a flat rate. Yeah. I can use it just like I'd use a Comcast connection, or I don't have to worry about it. And that's what I mean by the importance of just that little thing can unlock this whole ecosystem.
It's not just technical innovation that matters, it's commercial innovation.
100%.
Yep. Great.
100%.
Well, we're just over time. I just wanted to thank my fellow panelists for their excellent contributions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jay and Massim, for dialing in remotely. Thank you, Todd and William, for joining me in person. And we're all around after, so if you guys have questions after you see us exit the stage, please direct them towards us, as we'll be wandering the floor. Thank you very much. Take care.